We are now recording this call, just in case you guys ever want to go back to it. They are posted on our website along with all of our previous town halls as well. And we'll just get started with the presentation. So for our agenda for this month, we're going to be talking permitting. We're going to be going through a couple different things. You're going to hear from a couple different people. Diane Lowe will be talking about digital equity, and then I'll speak on our challenge process update. And then we have a guest speaker, Jill Springer from the NTIA, who I will introduce a little bit later on in the presentation. But we'll get straight into Diane's piece on digital equity so she can give us a good update on that. Diane, take it away.
Good morning. I will be brief. Our digital equity plan for the state was approved at the end of February, so we are moving forward with it. For those who don't know, the 2024 Digital Equity Capacity Notice of Funding Opportunity has been published, and we are working on an application for that. Will you go to the next slide? So briefly, and this is kind of a summary of what's pretty complicated or what can be pretty complicated. There are going to be 3 tranches of digital equity capacity money. The first of those is available now, and that's about $6.5 million for Nebraska. In another year, assuming all goes well, there will be about another 2.2 million. And then the following year would be about another 2.2 million. So about 10 million overall. But right now we've got access to 6.5 million, and that is what we are applying for. We go to the next slide. We have assessed and discussed and concluded internally within our NBO team here that we are going to prioritize 3 of our 5 goals for this first tranche of money. And a tranche, by the way, for those who don't know, is just a chunk of money, if that's not obvious from context. There it is. So for tranche 1 of the money, the stuff that we've got currently, we're prioritizing goal 1, which is basically BEAD and focusing on affordability of broadband service. Goal 4, which is technology skills and digital navigators, and then goal 5, which is telehealth. For the subsequent tranches, we will focus on the other 2 goals, 3 and 2, or 2 and 3, depending on how we decide to do that, what makes sense at the time. Will you go to the next slide, please? We have, from the date of award, which we anticipate to be about the end of August, we will have 9 months to determine and notify NTIA of our selected subgrants under the Digital Equity Capacity Award. Will you go to the next? Okay. We are going to subgrant out the bulk of the award. Sorry, I'm kind of anticipating a slide. We're going to bulk out the majority of the digital equity capacity money, and we have to address all of the covered populations. For those who are not familiar, these are those covered populations. And the next slide, please. So we will do competitive subgrants. We are working to ensure geographic coverage of the entire state, make sure we address all of these covered populations, and address those 3 prioritized goals, 1, 4, and 5. That is the plan in a nutshell. So if there are questions, I'm happy to take them, or you can hold them to the end. I don't know what the preference is. Patrick, you are muted.
Thank you, Diane. I was just saying that yes, hold your questions till the end or put them in the chat. We'll have a whole section for Q&A at the end of this. So with that, thank you, Diane, on that quick update. Moving into the challenge period before we get into the real important part of this presentation. We closed the portal with nearly 14,000 challenges that were just submitted. So that's not including our area challenges. Because of the way that our process ran, we encountered a significant number of area challenges, well over double of what the challenges we had submitted. So that's great that we were able to kind of expand that out. And thank you guys so much for participating in that process. For the ISPs, if you haven't already, or you will soon, or something like that in the near future, be receiving a notification if one of those area challenges has been triggered. You will still get the full 30 days that were allotted during the official challenge period of the challenge process. But just knows that could still be coming. We're still sifting through that because we had so many challenges, and we have to manually go through and actually activate those. So that can be coming. But you will, of course, still get that 30-day window. We're working as fast as we can to get those through. The advocates themselves will not be notified of any challenges because it could be a result of multiple different advocates Triggering those challenges, as you all know, we have to have six locations challenged for the same technology, same provider, and the same code in that area for an area challenge to be triggered. And there's only a handful of those codes that actually would trigger an area challenge. So that's just good for you guys to all know that. And if you have any questions, of course, shoot us an email at ndot.broadbandoffice@nebraska.gov. That said, the team is adjudicating challenges according to a rolling timeline. We're going to get them as the rebuttals come in. We'll keep on determining them. You might see an update on the should be a determination, but it won't tell you whether or not the challenge was sustained or rejected. That'll happen after we resubmit all of our determinations to NTIA and we get their final say on that. We don't really want to be posting our determinations prior to anything from NTIA because we don't want anyone to be confused that, oh, well, I heard that it was sustained, but then after NTIA reviewed it, it got rejected. What's going on with that? We don't want that confusion. So we're just going to make sure that we post everything after we go through that process. And that'll be in the late summer, early fall kind of timeline is kind of our expectations. Entirely depends on what we hear back from NTIA, as well as we're going to do our best to update the public-facing map with the information that we're going to be receiving in June from the PSC on the latest round of funding that they're putting out, as well as the latest version of the federal BDC. And then that map that comes out, that is a result of the challenge process, that is a result of the federal BDC, and that is a result of our in-state grant programs. That's the one that we're going to be using to allocate BEAD dollars. So I'll be hearing a lot more about that at that time, and that'll be a frozen map so we can all operate off of one of them. Now we understand there could be additional build out, there could be, additional programs on the federal level at least, or even on the local level that could adjust the reality on the ground. But that's as perfect or as close to perfect as we can get a map. One of the problems with making maps is once you have them set, they're already out of date because there's always changes happening in state. But that's about as close as we can get. We have to have at least something that is set in stone. So that's what we'll be operating off of at that point. So I want to make sure that I covered all of that. And without any further ado, next slide, Trevi, I'll go ahead and introduce Jill here. So thank you so much, Jill, for joining us. Really appreciate it. Jill Springer is the Senior Policy Advisor for Permitting in the Office of Internet Connectivity and Growth. She serves as the Chief Environmental Review and Policy Officer and Federal Preservation Officer for the Department of Commerce's National Telecommunications Information Administration, NTIA. Ms. Springer was also the Department of Commerce's FPO from 2010 to 2012 during the Broadband Technology Opportunities Program. Ms. Springer oversees the NTIA's initiatives to address barriers to timely broadband permitting and advises on environmental policy issues associated with the National Environmental Policy Act, otherwise known as NEPA, and the National Historic Preservation Act. Ms. Springer previously served as a policy advisor in the FCC's Office of Native Affairs and Policy and was the FCC's FPO and Associate Division Chief in the Competition and Infrastructure Policy Division. FPO is Federal Programs Officer, for those who don't know. Ms. Springer holds a Master of Law from Washington University of St. Louis School of Law, a Master of Heritage Preservation from Georgia State University, and a Bachelor of Arts in Political Science from Agnes Scott College. Sorry, a lot of big bio there, Jill. You've done a lot, so please take it away. We're very excited to hear from your experience and what you have to share with us today.
Great, thank you, Patrick. Do I have some slides? Excellent.
Yes, we do.
Well, thanks for the opportunity to talk to you today. We've been doing a lot of work on permitting initiatives at NTIA, and I'm happy to have the opportunity to introduce some new information to you and answer any questions that you might have. So next slide, please. Just wanted to briefly say, you probably are aware already that NTIA is currently administering $49.5 billion of broadband grants across 7 different programs. So we've got a whole lot going on, and the largest of these is the BEAD program. Next. And in terms of deploying broadband infrastructure, permitting is a particularly daunting challenge because linear projects necessarily require a lot of permissions and approvals. So even if you're proposing to do something that it might seem as innocuous as putting aerial fiber on existing poles, 1 mile of a deployment might be crossing multiple different jurisdictions. So in this example, you see that the project is within a state DOT right-of-way, so the federal highway might be involved. It could be crossing tribal lands, in which case approvals from the tribe as well as the Bureau of Indian Affairs could be necessary. Other federal lands like the Bureau of Land Management would also trigger permit requirements. And then there are state and local, municipal and other jurisdictions and approvals that could be necessary, as well as private ownership issues, which could involve railroads or poles themselves. So there are a lot of permitting considerations in deploying broadband. And so we've been focusing a lot of attention on how we can streamline and improve these processes. Next slide. With all of those different programs and all of those federal funds being committed to broadband deployments, we like to show this conceptual timeline, not necessarily to scare people, but to give you a sense of the fact that we are right now at a point where we have several programs that are going on concurrently, others that are coming online in terms of when the permitting requirements start. And that might be permitting in terms of the National Environmental Policy Act approvals and the other statutory requirements that are part of NEPA that convey with federal funding, that also are a factor when a federal permit is being issued, as well as the resource permits. So threatened and endangered species might have particular resource permit requirements. The Army Corps of Engineers could have particular resource permits. So just in general, we understand that in order to provide internet for all, concurrently, there are going to be a lot of people who are both making permit applications and receiving and processing them. Next slide. So recognizing that permitting is a lot of different things and there are a lot of variables, we've kind of organized the work into 3 different work streams. And so we've been doing, first and foremost, a lot of work to streamline NTIA's own NEPA approvals and the associated historic preservation and other environmental requirements. The second area that we've been focusing our permitting attention is other federal approvals. Basically, we all are part of the same federal family, and we understand that our federal colleagues, some of them are deploying other types of infrastructure, and all of them are receiving applications that are being generated as these projects are proposed and constructed. And then the third work stream is basically everything else, the state, local, and private approvals. And for this area of work, we really look to identify actions with the greatest potential universal benefit. So we have already held one state DOT right-of-way webinar in coordination with the Federal Highway Administration. And we have a second one that is planned for Tuesday, May 21st. And if you are interested in attending but haven't yet received an invitation, please let us know, and we're happy to push that information out to you. Next slide, please. So in terms of NTIA's own environmental requirements, in early April, we announced that we have established 30 new categorical exclusions for NEPA. And in addition, we adopted 6 categorical exclusions from the First Responder Network Authority. So why is this important? Well, NEPA can involve 3 different types or levels of review. The most extreme is an environmental impact statement. The second most detailed is an environmental assessment. And then a categorical exclusion, while it's a type of review, is basically a more streamlined kind of opportunity that an agency can carve out for projects that don't generally have potentially significant environmental impacts. And NTIA has done a lot of environmental reviews of broadband projects. And so as a result of that, we're able to identify a lot of action types that can qualify as categorical exclusions. The environmental review timeframe for a categorical exclusion is significantly shorter. It can be a 3 to 6 month review timeframe. And while you still have to do all of the statutory requirements that are part of NEPA. So for example, you have to consider threatened and endangered species, and you have to consider historic preservation and the Section 106 process. It really does save time. So we've maximized the availability of categorical exclusions for the broadband grant projects that we're funding. In addition to that, we're also adopting some programmatic environmental impact statements that FirstNet did in their deploying the National Public Safety Broadband Network. And the benefit of our adopting these is that it allows us to rely on that analysis when an environmental assessment is required. So it's going to, again, allow when EAs are required, folks who are proposing these projects to rely on that and not do, as much work. Essentially, it should shorten the time frame that's required for preparing an environmental assessment. We've also been working on some mapping-based tools that I'll talk about in a minute, and have a project tracking system for permitting that's in development now. Next slide, please. So when it comes to broadband projects, the two potentially most complicated environmental issues can be threatened and endangered species and historic preservation. And that said, when we went through the Recovery Act broadband reviews, we had, for all of the hundreds of Section 106 historic preservation reviews, only one adverse effect. And following up based on those results and the types of typical infrastructure that we see for broadband projects and the effects that we might predict from those, the Advisory Council on Historic Preservation developed some streamlined rules that were specific to federal lands. NTIA asked the Advisory Council to expand the availability of those streamlined Section 106 review processes to make them available for the Internet for All grant programs. And in March, the ACHP issued that amendment. So we do have right now another tool that's coming up that'll help with Section 106, and it does it establishes what the typical areas of potential effect are, and has some other streamlining measures depending on the types of infrastructure and where they'll be deployed. We have on our website now a flowchart guidance document that will help in applying the program comment and understanding its requirements. Next slide, please. In terms of the interagency work that we've been doing, BEAD is divided into 7 different regions. And while those aren't exactly the same as the federal land managing and federal permitting agencies regional organization, we did hold from September through April interagency regional broadband permitting meetings in each of these regions with all of the district and field level permitting staff who are going to be receiving the broadband applications as projects move closer to construction. And we did this in order to introduce not only the initiatives that NTIA is working on and to prepare the permitting agencies for the broadband permitting surges that they're going to see, but also to talk about once the projects go online and applications are generated, how we can best work together when we encounter project-specific issues. And coming out of this series of meetings, we will be setting up the infrastructure to have permitting roundtables to resolve project-specific issues as necessary. So next slide, please. In March, we also released the permitting and environmental information application. So this is a mapping-based tool that allows anyone who's planning a broadband deployment to go in, zoom in on the area that you'll be servicing, to take a close look at that specific location, and then by turning on and off layers, identify the federal permitting requirements, state permitting requirements, and identify tribal land boundaries as well. So this tool can give you an early heads up in identifying where you're going to be encountering permits if you are going to construct infrastructure. And then it also incorporates a number, actually we have hundreds of layers in this map, environmental layers that are correlated to NEPA review requirements. So using this tool, you can identify, for example, the threatened and endangered species and critical habitat areas that might be nearby or adjacent to your project. You can see floodplains and wetlands. And in considering these things early on, what we are hoping is that it gives you a really good opportunity to make deployment decisions and planning decisions to avoid environmentally sensitive resources so that your project can qualify as categorically excluded. Next slide, please. So this tool is publicly available on our National Broadband Availability Maps site. We have a public GIS face of that at nbam.ntia.gov. So that's one place that you can access this mapping tool. You can also access it on the Broadband USA permitting page, which it has both a link to the mapping tool as well as a video that shows you how to use the tool. And then for entities who have access to NBAM and are licensed users, the tool is also available within the NBAM site. So next slide, I think that's it. And I'm happy to answer any questions if you have those. But again, thanks for the opportunity to introduce these tools and initiatives to you today. Sorry, this is the first long talking I've done of the day.
No worries. Thank you, Jill, for that. I really appreciate that. And I mean, that also concludes our end of the presentation. So if you have any questions for us as well, please let us know. Anyone can speak up at this moment in time and ask questions for myself, for Jill, or for Diane here. We also do want to make sure that you guys are aware that this is time for us to connect you with any resources. So always just let us know what you need, even if it's beyond the scope of today's presentation. You can, of course, always send us an email. Our email is down there at the bottom. It's ndot.broadbandoffice@nebraska.gov. That's always the best way to reach the office. I'm not seeing any questions right now. I think we might have just hit them with so much information that they're all stunned, which is good, which is always good. So I think, Rachel, do you think that we can just go ahead and end it here and give everyone their time back?
Yeah, I've
That's
got a
quite
question.
good today.
Oh,
Can
we
you
got a
hear
question.
me?
We got a question.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. Absolutely. Go for it.
I've got a question on the Federal Permitting Office. Is there coordination between you and that agency? And if so, to what degree? They're obviously getting involved in the federal infrastructure, the Jobs Act, and how those permits, apply to the different industries, broadband being our favorite topic. But
Right.
is there coordination or oversight?
So I might have missed, did you say the Federal Permitting Improvements Steering Council? Is that who you're asking about?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great, yeah. So that is a very effective partnership that we have. The Permitting Council has provided funding to a number of different agencies to support broadband permitting, including NTIA. In addition, the Permitting Council is funding the Salesforce-based integrated environmental screening and permitting dashboard that we are developing for the BEAD program right now. We coordinate with them very regularly. You probably know that the Permitting Council maintains the FAST 41 dashboard.
Yeah.
And the FAST 41 system really was created to help organize and keep the permitting requirements of large projects, so projects over $200 million or particularly complicated projects, on track. There are also smaller projects can get on the dashboard, and particularly tribal projects. And we currently have 2 projects that are tracked on the dashboard. We feel like that's a really great system, and that's why what we propose to the Permitting Council in terms of the dashboard that we're developing is actually going to be incorporating their model quite a bit. One of the things that we find, because the broadband projects are significantly less than 200 million, or they're smaller projects, that the FAST 41 process can be, it doesn't scale super well for us to participate with all of the other agencies. So what we're trying to do is to develop our own kind of scaled model that will help us with the volume of projects that are going to be going through BEAD, rather than kind of having one-off projects that are listed on the Permitting Council's dashboard. But we work with them very closely, and I think like all agencies, we're very excited to work together to make these processes better and more efficient, and particularly to see where information technology can make us able to meet the requirements in a quicker time frame.
It's good to know that the coordination is going on, and kudos to you and your team on the 30 CADX updates you gave last month. That's very
Great.
helpful.
Thanks.
Jill, we did get another question in the chat asking what level of information will be expected in BEAD applications in order for NTIA to assess if NEPA Cat X is warranted, from Marcy.
So the final proposal requirement has a list of, or actually it requests a list of projects that the eligible entity believes will qualify as categorically excluded. We are right now working on a lot of technical assistance supporting that, because this tool that I mentioned that we're developing actually has a CADX screening component to it. And one of the things that, I appreciate the kudos for our adopting and establishing all these CADXs, but it means that we have a lot that could be applicable. And so what we're going to try to do is provide some tools to assist in showing which ones apply and considering the extraordinary circumstances. In general, for us to know that a categorical exclusion would apply, you will have had to have gone through, the Section 106 requirements to make sure that you're not adversely affecting historic properties. And have done some of the initial screenings for threatened and endangered species as well.
Perfect, thank you. Another question we have from Todd here. Question on permit timeframe. An ISP noted during a meeting I attended that they have waited 2 years for a National Park Service permit to be approved. Is there any regulation to cap timeframes?
So the Mobile Now Act requires action on a permit, a broadband or communications permit within 270 days. I think the rub there is that is 270 days from when an application is accepted as complete. One of the things that we have been doing is coordinating, as I mentioned, interagency, and that starts at the lowest level, in these interagency regional meetings where we've been talking to the field level permitting staff to make sure they understand our programs. But it goes as high as the principals level. And there really is, the principals, including the Secretary of Commerce, have met with the Secretary of Interior and other to talk about these broadband permitting challenges and to try to both identify where these issues like you're talking about are happening and to make sure that they are not going to pose impediments to the internet for all grant programs. So what I would tell you is that if you're aware of some current problems with permitting that are going on with particular parks or in particular land managing agencies or jurisdictions, we have a lot of infrastructure to try to resolve those interagency. And if necessary, I mean, our goal is always to identify the problem at the earliest time and resolve it at the lowest level possible. But we do have a lot of right now infrastructure in place to escalate issues where they really seem to be unable to be resolved by the folks who should be resolving them within that reasonable time frame.
Perfect. Any other questions? Thank you guys so much for those questions. That was great. Another question from Mike here. Any update on the release of an RFP to solicit support for the BEAD program? We do not have any updates on that right now. If there are going to be any RFPs released, we will make that public once we have determination on that. Another question from Todd, May 21st, right-of-way webinar details from NTIA.
So I will shoot something to you and Trevi, Patrick, after this, and maybe you can push it out to everyone who's in attendance today.
Yep, we'll do that. Absolutely. Thank you, Joe. Any other questions? I'm not seeing any. Thank you. Well, with that, thank you, Jill, for your time. Really appreciate it. Thank you, everyone, for coming today and bringing us those great questions. Really appreciate your time here. If anything does come up again after this presentation and you would really like to get an answer on that, again, send it to our email. That's the best way of reaching us. And without any further ado, thank you guys so much. Have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.